All right. So this is going to be mostly review. We've touched on both substitution and literal equations before, but like the problems that we saw in the quiz on Friday, your homework tonight is going to feature a lot of those same concepts. They're just going to do it in a little bit more of a complicated manner. So I want to start with substitution. Substitution. So when we're working on this, instead of just plugging in for x and y, what we'll often see is we'll get an equation. I'm just going to make up an equation off the top of my head. So I have 3x minus 2y is going to equal 9. And so we might be asked to do something like this. We'll be given the x coordinate. Maybe we'll be told x equals 0. And we're going to be asked to find the y coordinate. This is very similar to a problem that was on the quiz. And I just want to do it in front of you guys one more time to make sure that we understand what we're doing. So when I see this, I have to remember that this right here is an ordered pair. Ordered pair. And since it's an ordered pair, it's going to be x comma y. All right. So when I see something like this where it's 0 comma blank, I have to mentally think about what's going on with an ordered pair, x comma y. And I realize that this 0 represents my x and this blank represents my y. So essentially, what this is asking me is, given that x equals 0, what is y? Right? This whole thing is just a very lazy mathematician sort of way to communicate this complicated idea. Given that x is 0, what is y? And to do that, we're going to use substitution. So instead of our x right here, we're going to substitute in 0. So I'm going to write that like this. I'm going to have 3. Instead of x, I'm going to write 0 minus 2y equals 9. And from here, my whole focus is to figure out what my y is. So then I'm just going to simplify. 3 times 0 is 0, minus 2y equals 9. Don't really need that 0 there, so I'm just going to rewrite it without it. Negative 2y equals 9. I'm going to now isolate my variable by dividing by negative 2. Divide by negative 2. Reduces down to 1. Y equals a negative 9 halves. So then what I would do is I would just take this answer here, write it in like that, negative 9 halves. And that would be my answer for a question like that. I'm going to give you guys a second to copy that down. When you guys are set, just flash me a thumbs up so I know I can move on. Thank you. Take 5 ready. A couple more people still writing this down. And this is very similar to, what was it, question number 3 on the quiz? I believe it was question number 3. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to move on. Another way that we can use substitution is we can use substitution to check. We can use it to check if a point is on a line. Okay? So this time, imagine I gave you an equation. We'll just say y equals 1/3 x minus 2. And we were asked to check if the point 2 comma negative 4 was on that line. And so this time, again, I have to remember that this right here represents the point x comma y. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in accordingly. If my y is negative 4, well, when I see this y, instead I'm going to write negative 4. And that's going to equal 1/3. And then, well, here's my x. And I see that my x is 2. So I'm going to write in 2 there, minus 2. So now that I'm doing this, I'm not solving for a variable this time, right? It's not like I was given x and I'm being asked to find y. Instead, what I'm trying to see is I'm trying to see if this is true. So if it is true, what does that mean? What does it mean for it to be true? Connor? So this side would have to equal negative 4. And what does that mean about the relationship between the point and the line? That means that the point would be on the line. Absolutely. So if the point does match up, then it's going to be on the line. So we're going to head and do that. So negative 4 equals, well, it ends up being 2/3 minus 2. So now I have to do this. This is a great review of fractions. 2/3 minus 2. I'm going to put that over 1. I need a common denominator. So I'm going to multiply 2 over 1 by 3 over 3. Thanks, Amy. So I have 2/3 minus 6/3. 2 minus 6 ends up being negative 4/3. So negative 4 equals negative 4/3. So is this true? No way. So we know that this point is not on the line. Not on the line. And that is that. The second part that I want you guys to pick up here is just one more time solving literal equations. So let's move this over. And for this one, I might give you something like this. I might say 2 times h plus 3 equals 9. And I'll say something like this. Solve for h. And when it says solve for h, all that really means is that we're trying to imagine a future where we have h equals something. You know, when it looks like this, we found our answer. So we have to start from this point. We have 2h plus 3 equals 9. And there's multiple ways to go about it. The easiest way that it looks like for me is just to distribute the 2 at first. So I'll distribute it here and here. I end up with 2h plus 6 equals 9. I'll subtract by 6. 2h equals 3. And then just isolate my variable by dividing by 2. So h equals 3/2. And so now I've seen that I've isolated my variable, I've solved it for h, and we're good to go. But now let's imagine instead of just having one variable here, let's do that same problem, but let's imagine we had 2 variables. Say instead, let me use a different color. Say instead I had 2h plus 3, but I didn't know what 9 was this time. You know, maybe this time it was a k. Okay? And so now I'm being asked to solve it for h here. Well, the steps are going to be exactly the same. I'm still going to do the same things. It's just instead of a 9, I'm going to have this k. So I'll start by distributing my 2 again. You know, this step's going to be exactly the same. So I end up with 2h plus 6 equals k this time. Now I want to get h by itself, so I'm going to isolate that term by subtracting our constant term by subtracting 6. I end up with 2h equals k minus 6. And then finally, isolate the variable by dividing by 2. I get h equals k minus 6 all over 2. And then we can go ahead and do our heart right here. We can reduce this down, and we can reduce this down. So that h equals k divided by 2 minus 6 divided by 2. And I know 6 divided by 2 is just going to be 3. Minus 3. And so that becomes our answer. And so when we're looking at literal equations, we can do it for any number of variables. It doesn't matter what numbers are here. What matters is that we end up with one of our variables isolated on the left-hand side. And then we have everything else on the other side. And that should be enough of a review for you guys to do your homework.